what I really want to know is what's really going on in the Arab Spring. Why do we call for the removal of Gaddafi? It seems like we have never been willing to call for the removal of Assad from Syria, and yet Assad's killing more of his people than Gaddafi is of his Libyan people. We'd love to hear your take on that. So what's going on here, Avi? Do you understand what's going on?
Well, the way I understand it is very simple. There is a decision in the U.S. government to bring down autocratic rulers and to form a fanatic Muslim Brotherhood leadership replacement, which will then march on Iran. Iran is a Shiite country, and it is a threat to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is Sunni. The Sunnis feel a mortal danger, and they are right to feel a mortal danger. The Shiites of Iran are marching, and until now pretty much unopposed. President Obama, who I do believe is a Muslim, a Sunni Muslim, loyal to the King of Saudi Arabia, has promised that he himself would never go to war against a Muslim country. America also financially is in big trouble because of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and Libya. And so, Obama doesn't want to go to war with Iran because America is overextended as it is. So what Obama's plan is, bring in fanatic Sunnis who hate the Shiites like you cannot believe. And then once you have all these regimes in place, then they will march. They will be the proxies, the surrogates, the useful idiots who will march on the Shiite the Shiite country of Iran. And basically, if they don't do that, then the Shiites are going to win, and they're going to behead the Saudi leadership. So basically, this is a war which makes the Catholic Protestants' war of Reformation for 300 years look like a Sunday school picnic. This is going to be a tremendous battle. And then, of course, the Bashar al-Assad will be overthrown by the Sunnis. And when that happens, the Christians of Syria and the Shiite Alawites will be massacred. The Sunnis of Syria will then link up with the Sunnis in Lebanon and terminate the Hezbollah, which is also another tentacle of Shiite Iran. So basically, Lebanon and Syria will have their Shiites decimated or forced to convert to Sunni Islam, and then this will be the setting for the Armageddon. The Armageddon will be a Sunni war against Israel. We may see a war very soon with Iran, with Syria, with Lebanon, but that's not the Armageddon war. The world will be united against the Shiites.
Okay. A follow-up question or two here. So you're thinking that neither Israel nor the U.S. will go against Iran, even if we have absolute proof that Iran now has a nuclear weapon?
Well, you know what? Let me rephrase it. I am not saying that Israel, America will not go against Iran. What I'm saying is the primary force against Iran will be Sunni. I would even say, very temporarily, we will see an alliance between Jewish Israel, Christian America, and Sunni Saudis and the Muslim Brotherhoods. But what's going to happen immediately after the war with Iran, and Iran is taken apart, or a pro-Sunni regime or UN regime with PR, proportional representation for the people of Iran. Don't forget, half of Iran is Shiite, half of Iran is minorities, which are Sunnis. And what will happen is you're going to have, I believe, a parliament. It will have military occupation, world occupation of Iran, like you had a world occupation of Germany. And what will happen is the Shiite system will be terminated by this new regime in Iran imposed by the Saudis and the government. And then when all that happens, then everything will be okay for the world. But temporarily, maybe the spark that will start the war could be an Israeli air attack. It could be an American attack together with Israel. And by the way, I don't think Israel would attack ever without a specific green light from the Pentagon or from the president.
Well, Israel has said repeatedly that under no conditions will they allow Iran to have a nuclear bomb. Do you believe they'll really back that up regardless?
Well, you know what? I don't have to tell you. Like I said very early in this show, I'm not in the front row of the secret negotiations, and I'm not in the front row of what the Mossad is doing. But, Israel has all this information about what's really going on in Iran and exactly how close they are to achieving a nuclear weapon. And so I think that the day comes, the people who are supposed to know will know, and the decisions will be taken by the Pentagon and Israel together. and probably very, very much close with the Saudis and the Qataris. By the way, there's this email circulating now that came out from Hezbollah. I mean, they're petrified, and they came out and they said that the Israeli Air Force is in Qatar. And Qatar actually is very neutral. It's very pro-Iranian and pro-Saudi and pro-everybody. They're very neutral. And the Israeli Air Force is in Qatar, which is right across the pond, from Iran.
Well, that actually was in an article that I read this last week. And,
Right.
of course, with WikiLeaks, both Saudi Arabia and Bahrain had requested the U.S. to attack Iran, and the Saudi Arabia had given Israel permission to land and to have a base in Saudi Arabia to launch a war against Iran because, like you say, there's real enmity between those two forces. Avi, I want to back up a little bit because we passed over a question a while ago that I wasn't sure that we really got to the bottom of, but I've been watching with fascination when the revolts happened in Egypt. Almost immediately, President Obama came out and said Mubarak must go. Then the same thing happened in Libya. Immediately, Obama said Gaddafi must go. And yet, when the uprisings occurred in Syria, silence. And still, President Obama has not definitively said it's time for Assad to go. Now, why the difference, do you know?
Well, firstly, you'll forgive me for, I'm trying not to be arrogant, but you may consider it arrogance. I think it's a given that if you have 10% of the population of Syria was a Shiite Alawite, and they control, 10% controls over 10% of the population, which is Christian, and 80% of the population, which is Sunni. And the Sunnis were slaughtered in 1982 in the city of Hama. On Sunday, the Bashar al-Assad killed 150 people.
Right.
That's nothing compared to the 30,000 people who were killed by his father, Hafiz al-Assad, in 1982. The Sunnis have a long memory. The day of reckoning is coming. Bashar al-Assad is finished. He doesn't need Obama to say yes or no. He doesn't need Obama, to say that the Bashar al-Assad regime is finished. The Sunnis are 80%. They're going to take power. They're going to wipe out the Christians, unfortunately. America has to gear up to receive the Christians of Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon. Then there'll be many, many Shiite Alawites are going to flee. Obama will definitely take them in. And then, by the way, in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood comes to power. First thing they're going to do is kill the Christians. There are no more Jews. So if there are no more Jews, they got to go for the Christians. So you're going to have 10 million Coptic Christians either dying, converting to Islam, or fleeing. Now, when there are no more Christians in Egypt, I think this is the end of the Christianity in Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. Of course, you have more important things on American media like Casey Anthony. But the Christians will be terminated in the Middle East very soon. The only place where Christians will live and prosper will be Jewish Israel. So what's going to happen is the economies collapse. The Christians are the first to come here. By the way, if Christians come here from the Middle East, this is a blessing for America because Christians are educated, they're industrious, they're hardworking. And then when those people leave the Middle East, the Islamic peoples that are left are all going to be starving because the economies are all going to fail. They're all going to collapse. No international corporation will invest in Egypt or Syria if they're slaughtering the Christians. And that's what the Muslim Brotherhood is good for. So when all that happens, these countries will self-destruct. America is going to take in 150 million Muslims. Agenda 21, you've heard of Agenda 21, right?
Sure.
The confiscation of the forests and all. You're going to have Muslim cities built from scratch within these forests. And you're going to have 50 to 100, 150 million brought into the U.S. There are already 20, 30 million Muslims in America that the U.S. governments have been bringing in for a number of reasons. The floodgates are open because many American leaders are bribed by the Saudis. A lot of people have committed treason against Christian America. This is my message in the churches. So what's going to happen is the fanatic Sunni Muslim Arab Spring. It's not an Arab Spring. It's an Arab. Forgive me for saying it. The heat of Texas and Oklahoma right now, 111 degrees. This is not good. These countries are all going to collapse. The populations are going to starve. When they starve, they're going to flee. They're going to come to where it's greener, literally, which is the U.S., Canada, Europe, and Latin America. And then once these 100, 200 million Muslims are entrenched in all these countries in Europe, America, and Latin America, that they're going to work for the Islamization of those countries, which will mean the destruction of those countries, because Islam is a failed system.
Okay, I've got two more things I want to ask you about, Avi. David Broder, the famous columnist for the Washington Post, now deceased, but back on October the 31st of last year, he wrote a column saying that Barack Obama must go to war against Iran. His logic was, number one, Iran is a threat to world peace, and he could go to war against Iran and have the support of the Republicans because they favor that action. Furthermore, he said Barack Obama should do it because if he doesn't get the economy going again, he'll never get reelected in 2012. And he stated the only way to get this economy going is going to be a major war. He pointed out that Franklin D. Roosevelt couldn't get out of the Great Depression. No matter what he tried, nothing worked until finally he plunged America into World War II, and that pulled us finally out of the economic doldrums. That's what Mr. David Broder said in this column, published in our most influential newspaper in America, the Washington Post, and then many articles have been written over the last 2 weeks that have sort of hooked onto that and agreed with that. So with that concept going on, and with Iran supposedly trying to develop nuclear weapons, one more time, I'd just like to ask your opinion. Do you think that such a scenario could play out?
I say absolutely yes. And let me explain why. I'm not a prophet and I'm not a genius, but I have a wife who listens to their broadcasts. And the Saudis came out with this broadcast where they said, President Obama has two tasks. The first task is to destroy the Shiite threat, Iran, and the second task is to destroy the Jewish threat, Israel. Now, President Obama, it is true, has said he will never go to war against a Muslim country. But and the Saudis said if President Obama doesn't go to war against Iran, he can pack his bags and go home. That's what the Saudis said. Now, I think you'll agree with me. When Obama came to power in 2009 in January, Wall Street was at 6,000. And within a year and a half, Wall Street went up to 12,000. And I predict the Saudis were behind that. The Saudis will bring Wall Street up to 18,000 by November 2012 in order for Obama to get reelected. Wall Street will hit 18,000. Price of gas will be $2.50 a gallon. And everybody's going to say, salami, salami, baloney, that Obama's the Messiah. He did it. But part of the deal here is, indeed, the overthrow of the Shiite regime, and then immediately the international oil companies running land grab in Iran to get the new oil out from the ground, because the Ayatollah leadership has destroyed the oil infrastructure, because if you have the oil flowing to the west, you continue to strengthen the Christian stranglehold over Islam. So the Iranian approach is deny the Christian world, or deny the one world government the oil, and then Islam reigns supreme.
Okay, last question. Prime Minister Netanyahu was under incredible pressure from Barack Obama to resume negotiations on the basis of 1967 borders with land swaps. However, when Netanyahu went before the joint session of Congress, he received 30 standing ovations. It seemed like after that, Barack Obama backed off dramatically. From a Jewish perspective, from an Israeli perspective, am I reading that right, that the message from Congress was we are more on the side of Netanyahu than we are on the side of Barack Obama? Is that the way that was interpreted in Israel?
Absolutely correct. And indeed, it's very important to remember that Congress, after the last elections in November, went from 75% pro-Israel to 80% pro-Israel. The American public, the American population is pro-Israel. The problem is not the legislature. The problem is the executive and the judicial. And this is where the problem of Israel is. So it's very important to preach in the churches, which is what I do, what I've been doing for the last 21 years. I've been in over 1,000 churches of all denominations to get the Christians to understand that you guys have a right and an obligation to stand with Israel, because it's your Israel too. It's your Jerusalem too. It's your Messiah too, who's going to appear or reappear on the Mount of Olives. And if the Muslims get their way, the Jews will be dead on Saturday, the Christians will be dead on Sunday, and God's going to destroy this earth. So this is a war for the survival of the human race. This is not just about Israel, and it's not about territories or settlements. This is a war between God and Satan.
You are absolutely right, Avi. There's no doubt about it. The Battle of Armageddon will be a war between the real Christ, between God and Satan, and it's going to be over Jerusalem. God said 37 times in the Old Testament, I will put my name there. Well, that's what we're all involved in. That's what's going on in the world right now. Avi, what a joy to have you.
Hello again, Gary Searman, and welcome to another edition of Prophecy in the News. With us once again is author and lecturer Avi Lipkin from Israel. Stay with us. Well, it's always a pleasure for me to have Avi Lipkin in studio. Avi is a raconteur. He shares with us his wit, his wisdom, and by the way, a lot of that wisdom has to do with his perspective on what's going on in the Middle East today, and that's what we're going to talk about. Avi, welcome back.
Good to be back.
I really want to tap into your thinking today so that our audience can understand what in the world is happening in the Middle East. We hear so many conflicting accounts. We hear about what Bashar al-Assad is doing in Syria. We hear about Erdogan in Turkey and what he's doing and what he's not doing. We hear about the mixed up political scene in Egypt and on and on and on, and we cannot figure it out. And I would like for you, if you can, to put in concise and brief terms what you think is going to happen in the Middle East in the near future.
Yes, well, indeed, to understand what's happening in the Middle East today and the cause of the depopulation of the Middle East.
The depopulation of the Middle East.
Of the Arabic and Islamic countries, because what's happening is you have this constant division. In Egypt, this division between the more fanatic Muslims and the less fanatic Muslims. In Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, you have a struggle between Shiites and Sunnis. That struggle radiates into Turkey as well. It radiates into Yemen as well. And I know that most Americans, most of your viewers, do not really know what is the difference between Shiites and Sunnis. And what it is basically is the followers of the family of Muhammad are the Shiites, and the followers of the first three caliphs who replaced Muhammad, they're the Sunnis. And if you really want to understand it, all you have to do is think about two mafia families competing for the same turf. And it's been going on for 1,400 years, and it will never end.
The Godfather.
It makes the mafia look like pacifists. And,
wow.
And you know what? I'll tell you something else also. You'll allow me to tell one of my jokes, but actually it's a John Loeffler joke. You know John Loeffler from Steel on Steel. And so the joke is like this. You know, this Catholic priest, Father O'Malley, is attacking the Protestants in his Catholic pulpit in Belfast in Northern Ireland. And, you know, because there's still this lingering struggle between Catholics and Protestants there. Otherwise, the rest of the world, it's okay. And so anyway, he gets a call from the Archbishop. And the Archbishop, with his Irish accent, says, Father O'Malley, I have received reports you're bashing the Protestants. We are now working for peace in Northern Ireland. Is that clear from now? And you preach the gospel at the High Mass. So Father O'Malley gets up with his Irish accent. He says, and Jesus was having the Last Supper. And he said, one of you will replace me, will betray me. And so Matthew gets up. Is it I your father? No. Mark, is it I your brother? No. All of them till the last one is, Judas. And he gets up with his British accent and says, I say, old chap, is it I? So the thing is, the Catholics and Protestants were killing each other. It was a horrible thing, 300 years of wars of Reformation, but it's over. And, it's incredible. I go to churches all over the U.S., Canada, and Latin America, and Europe, and I see people in the church, and I go into the Catholic church, then I go to the Protestant church, and I see the same people in both churches. And you got families with 10 kids. 5 go to the Catholic, 5 go to the Protestant, and the next week they switch. And so you don't see Catholics and Protestants slaughtering each other. It's over, except maybe in the soccer fields in Northern Ireland.
So you're likening this internecine struggle to what's going on between the Shia and the Sunni.
But it's over.
But it's over.
Because in Christianity, you have love and forgiveness. In the Islamic world, 1,400 years, and it's only getting worse every day with the Shiites and the Sunnis slaughtering each other. And you have to remember, it says in the Quran, chapter 5, verse 33, it says, anyone who makes war against Allah and his Prophet Muhammad and spreads disorder in the land, we will kill, we will crucify, we will chop their arms and legs off, and we will banish from the land. And that's what the Muslims are doing to the Muslims, because the Shiites see the Sunnis as infidels, and the Sunnis see the Shiites as infidels, and they're going to kill each other until there's nobody left. And, I don't say you, I mean, if God forbid some American or some Christian converts to Islam, that person is not safe, because if that person converts to Sunni Islam, the Shiites will kill him. And if the person converts to Shiite Islam, the Sunnis will kill him. And I always say Islam is a religion of peace when the whole human race is killed. Because there are no more Jews, no more Christians, no more Hindus, no more Buddhists, no more blacks, and then Sunnis and the Shiites slaughter each other. So Islam is a religion of peace, and the entire human race is annihilated because their God is Allah, Satan, who claimed he was greater than God. He cannot claim he's greater than God as long as there are those in the image of God. So Satan has to destroy every human being on the face of the earth. And I want to say right now, I'm going to look at the camera and say, I love you, Muslims, if there are any Muslims watching, but that system is not good for your life and your health. You should abandon Islam and become Christians or Jews or anything else, just not Islam.
Now, speaking, I don't know how to follow that exactly, but speaking as an American.
I say bring them to the Lord, or they'll bring you to the sword.
Of course.
Because our God is the Lord, their God is the sword.
And the invitation is always open to come to Jesus, and that's part of what I do as a Christian pastor. Make known the gospel, a 2,000-year-old enterprise, by the way, and still the world's foremost and most respectable enterprise there. I've said my piece for Christendom, but I want to say this as an American Christian. I'm listening to you, and I am seeing what you described through the eyes of an Oklahoman, if you will, watching Israel and hoping that little Israel can summon up the strength to overcome these enemies that threaten to wipe her out to the last Jew. And we see this all the time, and we say, what's going to happen to Bashar al-Assad? What's going to happen to Hassan Rouhani? What's going to happen to Erdogan over there and al-Sisi of the Egyptian army? All these people who are running the opposition right now. Do you see Israel in some way expanding, conquering in this area, or do you see Israel being driven further and further inward?
Look at Israel, forgive me for saying it, kind of like a Maxwell Smart Agent, 86. It's a country that does not want to conquer. It does not want to rule over other people. It wants to be this little, happy, rustic family democracy where we're all Jews, maybe a few Christians, maybe a few Muslims. And basically, what's going on all around us not that it doesn't interest us, we don't want to be involved in it. And we don't want to conquer Lebanon. We don't want to conquer Syria. We don't want to conquer Saudi Arabia. We don't want to conquer Jordan. We don't want to conquer the Egyptian peninsula of Sinai. But I believe we will take all these territories because God is going to set it up in such a way. God is not asking us. God has a plan. And in Deuteronomy 11, God says, wherever your feet will tread, which includes Saudi Arabia, because we were there. That's what my sixth book talks about. We were there 40 years, and we're coming back. And, we could do at least 2 hours just on that book. What's going to happen is these areas are going to depopulate as a result of all these civil wars going on there. The cities are not going to be rebuilt until the Jews and the Christians come in, take the land back.
So you are really looking at what we see in the Western press
as God's hand.
Yeah. And you're saying, you see God's hand in motion, but you really see a quote-unquote depopulation there. Now, we don't read this in the papers. We don't read it in our magazines or our editorials. We don't hear people talking about the depopulation of the Middle East, and yet you think this is a huge factor.
Yes, and indeed, I'd like to, am I allowed to quote the Bible?
Why not?
In this book, I give two quotes, which had I said these things 3 years ago, before the Arab Spring began in February of 2011, people say, this is obviously crazy. So one of them is the most blatant, and that's Isaiah 19, verses 1 and 2. It says there, Egyptian will fight Egyptian. Brother will fight brother. Neighbor will fight neighbor. City will fight city. What do we see today? In Libya, in Egypt, in Yemen, in Syria, in Lebanon, all these countries, it's brother against brother, neighbor against neighbor, and city against city. Had I said that 3 years ago, 3 years ago Mubarak was riding high. Mubarak was in power. He was in power 30 years. The question was which one of his sons was going to rule after him. That's basically what it was. And all of a sudden, God completely reshuffled the deck. Hillary Clinton was complaining all the time about this horrible Israel. Israel built 100 homes in Jerusalem. Oh, this is the end of the world, The fact that they're killing millions of black people in Sudan, 500,000 Muslims are being killed by, whiter-skinned Muslims in Darfur, that they're killing, not only are they killing Christians in Nigeria, but the Boko Haram are killing fellow Muslims who say, no, we should live in peace with these Christians. They're all being slaughtered by the Boko Haram who are more fanatic. State Department, that doesn't interest them. The only thing that interests the State Department is Israel is building 100 homes in Jerusalem, or 200 homes. That's the end of the world.
Yeah.
And now what we're facing is the annihilation of 15 million Christians in Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, and the U.S. State Department doesn't talk about that. They talk about Israel building 100 homes in Jerusalem.
Now, in the face of that, let me just say that as an American Christian and one who studies Bible prophecy, I see Israel victorious over an invading enemy. In several places, in Isaiah, Jeremiah, Zechariah, chapter 12, where the leaders of Israel rise up like a torch in the woods and just burn the enemy away and become victorious in several military actions. And in Psalm 83, where there's a list of Israel's enemies saying, let us cut them off from being a nation, which, by the way, the PLO, the PA is essentially involved in today.
Yeah.
We see those groups of people coming against Israel, Israel rising up militarily and being victorious over the enemy.
We don't have to. God's doing it for us. The Arab Spring is causing the Muslims to kill each other, which I'm very sad the Muslims kill each other. But we can see in every country the Muslims are killing each other. The countries are self-destructing, depopulating. All these cities, like Homs and Haleb, where Bashar al-Assad has basically destroyed the cities, and out of 20 million population, 3 million have fled from Syria. These cities will never be rebuilt. So what we're seeing is, Damascus being destroyed in a day. Well, it's not being destroyed in a day. It's being destroyed over a period of years. But it's being destroyed for God, maybe it's a day. And we see the Shiites and the Sunnis slaughtering each other. So it's not for Israel. It's not Israel's war. It's God's hand. And many times, I go to, I'm sad, I'm a little ashamed to tell you this, but, I spend the Sabbaths, during the week I'm with the Christians, Sabbaths I'm with the rabbis. And once I was at home and some lady, a rabbi's wife, says, oh, things look so dark and so terrible. My wife is always saying things are terrible. I said, no, things are great. And she said, what's going to be? I said, no problem. I said, 2 Chronicles chapter 20. And she said, oh, yeah? What's that? I said, what do you mean, oh, yeah, that? Bring me a Bible, I'll show it to you. The rabbi didn't have a Tanakh, an Old Testament. He only had the Talmudic books because you only study what the rabbis have spoken about. The rest is irrelevant.
Wow.
And so I said to her, 2 Chronicles chapter 20 is a Jewish book. It's a Jewish text. I was taught that text by Christians. And it says right there, King Jehoshaphat is king of Jerusalem, and they are besieged by 3 armies, Ammon, Moab, and Seir. 3 armies. They're all cousins, by the way, the forerunners of the Muslims today. And they're all surrounding Jerusalem. And the children of Israel come to King Jehoshaphat. What are we going to do? We can't defeat these 3 armies. He said, go to the high priest, go to the temple, pray there, prostrate, before the Lord. The next morning, they opened up the gates of the city of Jerusalem, went out, and they saw all the 3 armies destroyed each other. In other words, God sowed confusion and destruction between the enemies of Israel. This is what we see today with the Shiites and the Sunnis. They are destroying each other because their purpose is to destroy Israel. And in Zechariah 2, verse 12, which Christians taught me, by the way, that the Jews are the apple of God's eye. And anyone who touches the Jews touches the apple of God's eye. So if the Muslims want to destroy the apple of God's eye, they're the ones who are going to get destroyed. That's God's word.
Well, I see that in Egypt for certain.
Yeah.
That is to say, it's Egyptian against Egyptian today.
Yeah.
And I believe we see it, for example, between the Saudis and the Iranians today.
Yeah. Right.
There are groups that are arrayed against each other.
Yeah.
And so you're saying, in your thinking, that's the important thing to watch.
To watch what God is doing, to be ready if we are attacked. But I think at this stage, we see certain ironic things happening whereby, for example, the Saudis are actually drawing close, maybe for cynical reasons, but they're drawing close to Israel, hoping that Israel will lead the attack against Iran. Because the leadership of Iran really seriously plans to behead the Saudi king and his family. And so the Saudis are actually looking for military, maybe temporary alliance with Israel, let the Israelis lead the attack, because it seems like Obama said in his book that he would never attack a Muslim country, which means he will not attack Iran. If any attack takes place, it'll have to be Israel doing it. And by the way, my wife Rachel has picked up many times broadcasts where the Saudis were saying, you know, Obama has to do what we tell him. He has to destroy the Shiite leadership of Iran, destroy Israel, and destroy Christian America, make it a Muslim country. So what Obama wants to do is let the useful idiots destroy each other, Iran and Israel. Let them destroy each other. America comes out smelling like roses that Obama did not lead the U.S. military, which is getting castrated by Obama, into a war, another war with Iran, another adventure. So let the Israelis attack. Let Iran, Syria, Hezbollah, and Lebanon, and the Palestinians attack Israel all at one time. And Obama comes out smelling roses because he defeats Iran, which makes the Sunnis happy, destroys Israel, which makes everyone happy.
What a fascinating point of view you bring, and I hope you, our audience, are appreciating this as much as I am sitting here, because Avi is speaking from an entirely different perspective than we who never visit the Middle East, and we're blithely unaware of these cultural differences that regulate men's behaviors and of the different factions in Islam and so forth. That you actually live and breathe these things. In fact, right here in front of me are 6 of Avi's books. We're going to offer them to you a bit later, which he describes as his life. In writing those 6 books, essentially you've condensed into these books what you're talking about right now.
Yes, my books contain military intelligence, current events, private investigation that I've done over the last 25 years, and I've done a lot of private investigation along the Mexican borders, the Canadian borders, European borders. I pick up information you will never get, even from Fox. Of course, my wife is the primary dynamo, the primary motor behind me. You know, Rachel and I have been together 45 years, and she's been in her work in the Israeli government 30 years, but she had 20 years of her life at first in Egypt where she learned about Islam, she learned about how these people think, and she sees things, she can look, know exactly what their intention is. And, I hate to say it, man, but sometimes you really need to listen to your women.
Don't you listen to your wife all the time like I do? Certainly you do.
Can I tell a quick joke? This is good for the pulpit pastors, if there are any pastors watching. What's the key to happy marriage? When the man makes a mistake, he should be a man about it and apologize. When the woman makes the mistake, he should apologize even more quickly. When I say that in church, I don't see the men smiling at that one.
Well, the 2 words that make a marriage work, yes, dear.
How much, dear? Cash or credit, dear? I'm well trained, you can see.
Now, we could go on and do the rest of the program about marriage counseling, but I'd like to stick to the subject, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And the subject is from the Jewish mind, the modern Israeli perspective. You look at enemies. Here we are in Oklahoma. I imagine maybe the Kansans want to wipe out Oklahoma, and the people in Arkansas want to wipe out Oklahoma, and the Texans want to wipe out Oklahoma, and those people in New Mexico want to wipe out Oklahoma, and that's sort of the way I see Israel. You're living there in the middle of a group of people. All of them want to wipe you out, and Americans as outsiders are looking at this and saying, wow, Israel must at some point launch a huge counter invasion, perhaps, and wipe out these enemies. And you're saying maybe not?
Well, what I'm saying is that at this stage, it seems to be since February of 2011 that the civil wars taking place in the Islamic world are self-contained. In other words, they spill over the borders into the neighboring countries, but not really into Israel. Israel, I used to say, it was like a flower in the desert. Now Israel's like a flower in the middle of a forest fire. And somehow God, protects us and keeps us safe from these things. And so what I think is, like I said before, the killing of the Shiites by the Sunnis and the killing of the Sunnis by the Shiites is something that knows no end. The Catholic Protestant Reformation, wars of Reformation, are over. And Catholics and Protestants may have theological, debates, but there's no killing going on. one more joke. You know the difference between Southern Baptists and Northern Baptists? Let's go to hell. I mean, even the Southern Baptists and Northern Baptists fight it out, but nobody's killing nobody. Democrats and Republicans have elections. When the Democrats fall from power, the Republicans don't slaughter them. When the Republicans fall from power, the Democrats don't slaughter them. That's Judeo-Christian Western civilization. In the Middle East, when you're in power, you fall from power, you're going to get your head chopped off, and all your followers and your family are all going to be killed, and then the new people come in, and, you know, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely, and so you have this absolute killing that goes on of the opposition. And that's, the Shiite, I want to go to a very important question so people will understand. The French and the British came in after World War I, divided up the Ottoman Empire, drew these arbitrary borders.
Right.
And they did it intentionally, so many minorities fighting it out with each other, that they would be more malleable and more controllable by the colonialist British and French powers. So what has happened is you have, for example, Syria. Well, who's Bashar al-Assad? He represents 10% of the population of Syria, which is Shiite Alawite. The Christians are 10%. The Christians and the Alawites now make 20%, so they're allies. Then you have another group called the Kurds. You have another group called the Druze, D-R-U-Z-E. These people are all together with Bashar al-Assad, and of course, certain power elites of Sunnis that work with Bashar al-Assad. So Bashar al-Assad really has about 50, 60% of the population behind him. Now, what's happening is you have 40 to 50% of the population fanatic Sunnis, because the Sunnis are 80%. The Sunnis themselves are divided against each other. Some people still support Bashar al-Assad. So you have all of this international intervention taking place in which the Hezbollah, who are Shiites, and the Iranians, who are Shiites, are coming in to back Bashar al-Assad. And Turkey and Egypt and the Chechens and all these Al-Qaeda are coming in to back the Sunnis. This is like a giant sinkhole. It's like a giant vortex sucking in the different types of Muslims to kill each other. I mean, I cannot describe this more than it's the hand of God destroying those who equally hate Israel and want to destroy Israel. And if you remember, Turkey wanted to intervene. Turkey was threatening to invade Syria. And all of a sudden, Turkey pulls back, and nobody's asking what happened. And it's very simple what happened. If you remember the riots in Istanbul about a year ago, the Turkish government under Erdogan came out and said, you know, we know there's a foreign government intervening in our affairs. It wasn't Israel he was talking about, it was Iran. Because Turkey today, population of 70 million people, 31% are Shiite Alawites, like Bashar al-Assad. If he goes against Bashar al-Assad, the Iranians are going to stir up the 31% of the population to make trouble for the Turkish Sunni government. Now, 31% Shiites, 25% Kurds. The Kurds also are not happy under the Sunni Turks. So if you can imagine 31% plus 25%, that's 56%. They're the majority. And you may see a Syria developing in Turkey, and Iran will be fostering a civil war. Now, the same applies to Iran. Iran is 50% Shiite, and then 50% minorities. So you've got Azeris and Kurds and Arabs and Baluchis and Zoroastrians and Christians, and you know, these people really do not have representation in Iran today. So I predict we will be seeing eventually either a Persian Spring taking place or an Iranian Spring, backed by the UN, perhaps a special ops on the ground, perhaps some kind of invasion. I don't know exactly how. I think it'll be an internal revolution among the Iranian people backed by Western powers. The Shiite regime will be overthrown, and then we will see an Iranian Spring. We will see a Turkish Spring. We will see a Saudi Spring. All these Islamic countries are going to have civil wars and collapse. Well, like I said before, I see that there is God's hand in action in all the countries around us. Israel is flowering. It is growing. The economy is doing relatively well compared to the rest of the world. I think what we're seeing is the quiet before the storm, in the sense that there will be soon many, many Jews and Christian spouses and children moving to Israel. Our population will grow from 6 million, I believe, to 16 million, or maybe even more. The day will come, and we will see the fulfillment of prophecy that it says in Zechariah 8:23, the 10 men of all languages will grab a hold of the tzitzit, of the prayer shawl of the Jew, and say, we will go with you to Jerusalem. I'm adding Jerusalem, but that's where we're going with you. Because the Lord is with you. Where? In Jerusalem.
Of course.
Yes, and it says in Isaiah 60 that there will be camel caravans carrying all the produce of the world to Israel, and strangers, foreigners, will carry the Jewish men and women on their shoulders back to the land of Israel. So I see that happening also. I don't know if you heard of Tommy Waller and the Jubilee group that pick grapes as volunteers. Now we have hundreds of Christians going to Israel for 3 months at a time to work as volunteers. Only because it's biblical, it's prophetic that strangers will come home, build the walls, strangers will come help us in the harvest.
You don't have a pessimistic view at all, do you?
I'm very optimistic.
All right.
You have to be, because God is going to have the victory.
Avi, thanks for being with us today on Prophecy in the News. May God bless you and yours. And by the way, blessings to you. Have a great day in the Lord, and remember, keep looking up, everybody. Prophecy in the News is a viewer-supported program made possible by our many friends around the world. Be sure you tune in every day for breaking news and our daily prophetic news updates at prophecyinthenews.com, or follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/prophecyinthenews.
The message is a very unusual message, because what I do is I connect the dots between what people know as the threat of Islam together with the one world government plans for global domination, or a one world order, and Israel and the United States, and what's going to happen to the Christians in America and Christianity in the world, and how Islam is planning to conquer the world together with the banks of Islam, because they work with Islam, which is a very new phenomenon. And the Arab Spring will reach Arabia. If the Arab Spring reaches Arabia, the kingdom will collapse. The Al-Qaeda people, who are Saudis, but they hate the Saudi king because he's considered a traitor for doing business with the West, these Al-Qaeda people are going to say, hey, to destroy Christianity, we got to destroy the economy of Christianity. We have to destroy the world economy. We have to blow up the oil wells. And that's when the one world government people will say enough is enough and suppress Islam. But at this stage, Islam is winning. The American government, most governments in the world are pro-Islamic because of the power that these people have. The scenario, as I see it, is like this. You know that the oil situation is, of course, critical for the one world government, for the economy. If you have the world demand for oil spiking, then the production has to increase. But what we saw happening over the last 10, 12, 13 years was the price of oil went from $8 a barrel to $147 a barrel within a very, very short time. And for example, by 2008, when the world economy began to collapse, the only country that was really increasing its oil production every year was Canada. And one of the reasons for the 2003 invasion of Iraq was that Saddam Hussein had allowed, after 35 years of misrule, he had allowed his oil production to drop to nearly zero, and Iraq sits atop a lake of oil, and one of the plans was to overthrow Saddam Hussein and then completely rebuild the entire oil infrastructure. And Rumsfeld, former Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, was heavily criticized for saying that the oil of Iraq would pay for the war, and the Democrats were hounding him, and finally he resigned. But by 2008, the Iraqis began to come online with their new oil production. And so today, Canada and Iraq are basically the two countries that are constantly increasing their oil production. But countries like, for example, like Russia, Saudi, the Gulf, Venezuela, these countries were decreasing their oil production, hoping to reap more benefits for less oil. And the less oil there was, the higher the price. But they nearly destroyed the one world government economy. So now,
because the main cost of business was the cost of oil, which is going to food and transport and everything. Everything. Now, the next stage is Iran. Iran sits atop a lake of oil. Is that the Ayatollah regime does not want to provide the oil to the world in order to destroy the world economy, to destroy Christianity. The way to destroy Christianity is to destroy the economy of Christianity. People don't understand this. If you destroy the one world government economy, billions of people are going to die of starvation, sickness, and chaos. You're going to have riots. You're going to have a completely insane situation.
So as I understand it, and I'm not a globalist, but I think I understand these globalists. They're saying, you know what, we will overthrow the Iranian regime to get to that oil.
Yeah.
Are we going for a break?
We are indeed, yeah.
Okay,
this is, in a sense, all these wars are oil wars, aren't they?
Yes.
Let's go through the analysis of what's going on in the Middle East and what's happening in Saudi Arabia and these other countries. These really are oil wars. In fact, the northern area of Iraq has now been proven oil reserves that are 8 times as much as Saudi Arabia, over 5.5 to 6 trillion barrels already proven. There's probably more. The second largest gas producer in the world is Iran. And, of course, they don't have the production facilities, so they have to actually ship their oil to China to be refined by the China Oil Company. What's going on now, of course, in Iraq is a lot of this oil is being sold and processed by Chinese oil refiners and shipped out of ports. The Middle East is really being rearranged around the whole issue of oil, isn't it?
Yes, and indeed, I'm always constantly shocked when I hear the news talking about the nuclear threat of Iran, the nuclear threat this, the nuclear threat that, and my contention is that's all a fig leaf.
I think so. I don't buy it at all. I think that the real issue is economic. In fact, I think even the threats back and forth, even the situation in Syria, is the globalists are in a sense behind this idea of promulgating a Sunni-Shiite conflict so they can get greater control by balkanizing these different powers to control the oil.
Yes, very correct. I take it one step further, that the plan is not only to balkanize, but actually to destroy Shiite Islam, or to make Shiite Islam totally subservient to the Sunni Islam. In other words, give the Sunnis the absolute monopolistic power over the Islamic world. Anyway, so if you'll allow me, I will go into continue where I was regarding Iran. So there are 4 reasons for the overthrow of the Iranian regime. And of course, one of them we mentioned is the nuclear threat to Israel.
Right.
But the nuclear threat to Israel, the problem is not the Israeli Air Force bombing the heck out of their nuclear facilities, which can only delay it by a few months. The real need here is for an overthrow of the Ayatollah regime and the imposition of a democratic parliamentary system under the auspices of the United Nations, which, of course, is exactly up the line for the thinking of President Obama. Because 50% of Iran is Shiite Persian, Farsi, and 50% of Iran is minorities, because you've got Kurds, you have Azeris, you have Baluchis. These people are Sunnis. And you've got Arabs who are Shiites, but in the southwest, but they are not Shiite Iranians. They are Arabs in Khuzestan. So anyways, the point I'm saying is that we will be seeing the overthrow of the regime, the imposition of a parliamentary democracy under the UN auspices. Iran, I believe, like in World War I, like in World War II, Iran will be divided up into zones. You're going to have a Russian zone. The Russians keep saying that, and sending helicopters and sending weapons, and that's fine. In the end, the Russians are going to turn against the Shiites because the Russians are going to get a big slice of the pie. You can work with the Russians. You just have to give them a big slice of the pie.
Exactly. In other words, right now it's going on as horse trading, and so the issue about Iran and the verbiage in the local, in national, international media is simply the external smoke from the fire going on underneath with the horse trading and exchanges going on for what positions they take in this new world order, right? Including Russia and China.
And, everybody talks about Obama being a socialist. And, we had another president called Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who's a Democrat and a socialist, and he gave the Russians half of Europe. And, of course, praise God, the European, Eastern European people got, little by little, got their democracy. There's still a long way to go. But communism was defeated in Europe, except in Belarus, but that's another story. But anyway, so President Obama is also a socialist Democrat, and he's probably going to say to the Russians, "Hey, listen, what's your price? You name your price, we'll pay you. You'll take whatever slice of the pie you want in Iran, but just be with us." And now the reason I'm saying this is because the moment the Russians come on board, Iran collapses like a house of cards in 3 days. And I think that the Iranian Ayatollah leadership will probably be promised political asylum. Their money is outside of the country anyway, probably in Moscow. So these people will be given asylum, and it's a happy ending for the Iranian people. under the auspices of the United Nations. Obama gets the credit; he's Messiah. So anyway, so we see right here some very interesting reasons for war with Iran. The democracy business is not really important. The nuclear business with Israel is not very important. The two important points here are oil and the schism between the Sunnis and the Shia.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, that schism is probably the most serious of all these issues because it's a very hot. They hate each other more than they hate Jews or Christians or anybody else.
Very, very correct. And I want to say something about the Shiites. Shiites are a very persecuted bunch of people. They've been massacred. By the way, the Muslims have killed 270 million Muslims, in the last 1,400 years. They've killed their own people. They're continuing to kill their own people. And the Shiites are what I call poor, pure, and Puritan. And the Saudis, who are Sunnis, enjoy this profligate spending. And they go off to drinking, debauchery, and harlotry in Europe, America, or even in Egypt. Actually, Egypt is going to shut down very soon because the Muslim Brotherhood took over. But the Saudis are notorious for their orgies, and they have all this money. But the moment they get back to Saudi Arabia, they're the keepers of the holy places. You follow what I'm saying?
Right.
So the Shiites are saying, we see through all this hypocrisy. Forgive me for mentioning Jesus' name now, but, Jesus was the kind of guy, he said, I hate hypocrisy. These Pharisees are pretending one thing and they're doing the other. And that's kind of what the Saudis are doing. They're pretending to be holy people, controllers of Mecca and Medina. And the Shiites are saying, nonsense. We're going to take Mecca and Medina, and we're going to chop off the heads of these Saudi kings and princes. And we're going to establish Shiite Islam as the true Islam. And let me tell you, the Saudis take this very seriously, and rightfully so. And so I believe what we see here is a concoction here, a cocktail of four very important reasons for the overthrow of the Ayatollah regime. Shifting over to Syria and Lebanon, now we're seeing something interesting here. I look at Iran kind of like an octopus, and Syria is a tentacle, Lebanon is a tentacle. By the way, Iraq is a tentacle. The American government said, the Iraqi people should have democracy.
Well, the Iraqi people are primarily Shiite, and
exactly.
in fact, a good majority of the population are Shiite, and they're, in a sense, sociologically and religiously allied with Iran anyway.
Yeah, you know what? You know what the Arabs say? I live in the Middle East. I'm telling you, the Sunni Arabs are saying Americans are crazy. They had this crazy president, Jimmy Carter, who overthrew the Shah of Iran, who was the best friend America could ever have in the Islamic world, and brought in Ayatollah Khomeini, who was the craziest guy you could ever bring in. And Jimmy Carter said about Ayatollah Khomeini, he's a saint. He's a wonderful man. He's a man of God. He's a unifier of the people. And this is the guy we need to replace the Shah of Iran. And after all, Muslims serve the same God as the Christians. That's what Jimmy Carter said.
That's
and
crazy.
My contention is that Allah is Satan. So is Satan God? Is God is Satan?
No.
So anyway, stupidity and ignorance of President Jimmy Carter brought about the fall of America's greatest ally, Iran, in the Islamic world, and turned Iran into enemy number one. So what do the Arabs say? They say these Americans are stupid. And George W. Bush did exactly the same thing with Iraq by overthrowing a Sunni leader and bringing in a Shiite leader who has now created a second Shiite state, fanatic Shiite state, with 60% of Shiites, and they're allied with Iran.
Exactly. Amazing. Very good analysis of...
Okay, well, firstly, what I want to do, there's a very famous expression which I don't hear so much in America anymore. Remember, hold your horses?
Yes.
And I would like to say, if possible, hold your horses.
That's what I think, too. I think hold your horses. I don't think that there's going to be a big war. I think this is playing cards for a new financial order that is being set up with Russia and China. As we mentioned on the break, Russia and China want a new deal. China with the Asia group just last year, and Russians with their basically the single economy based on oil and manipulating the price to stay high. They want a new system, and they feel excluded from the world economy.
Okay, firstly, let me say one thing. The Chinese are very, very ambitious. They're very, how shall I say, imperialistic and expansionist. I think that the Chinese have their eyes on Spratly Islands, contested by Philippines and Vietnam as well. The Chinese, of course, would like to take Singapore, which is a Chinese island. They want to take Taiwan. But I think the Chinese understand that without Walmart, they're sunk. And without Walmart, forgive me for saying sometimes I think even Jimmy Carter, President when they made these deals to open up trade relations with China, because the Chinese really have an anchor wrapped around their necks, and it is the American debt, it is the American economy, it is the world economy, and the Chinese are not stupid, and they're not. I think the Chinese are famous for having patience. The Chinese are not going to go looking for a war. So I don't think that the Chinese are going to send their army across Pakistan to fight for Iran. By the way, I have to tell you something. Chinese also know their history. The Muslims hate their guts. And by the way, the guts of the Russians, too. And the Russians, by the way, are the most racist people on the face of the earth. The Russians don't like the Iranians. The Russians don't like anybody in the Islamic world. The Russians don't like any foreigners. They don't like blacks. They don't like anybody.
Right.
And they see America as their enemy number one. Now, the difference between Russia and China is that China is totally integrated in the one world economy. The Russians are not. The Russians live off in some other universe. The Russians, they sell their minerals and they buy some expensive luxury goods from the West. But the Russians basically exist on their own.
They have a mono economy. The Chinese, though, are completely based on the market economy of slave labor and selling things in Walmart and Tesco and Target stores, and without the ability
I don't see World War III so quickly.
No, I don't either. I think we're going to have an outbreak of peace, though. These moves tell me peace is coming very quick. Interesting dialogue. Avi, tell us what you just mentioned. I want to hear from Tim, because this is important to look at this dialogue to where we're going. People can listen and kind of make up their own conclusions, but I tend to think that we're heading toward an outbreak, not of war, but of peace. When we see these saber-rattling that's public, this saber-rattling is for public consumption because it's a new deal between the West and the globalist bankers and Russia and China, and these are a different kind of proxy war. This is not a military war. It's just a war between Sunni and Shiite, which is being used as a leverage. What we're seeing here is something quite different. Avi, give us your perspective, and then we'll hear from Tim.
Well, like I said during the break, I think that the Russians and the Chinese are going to be offered a humongous slice of the pie by Obama. And don't forget, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt did exactly the same thing in World War II, where he gave the Russians half of Europe. I think we're going to see a dividing up of Iran, as happened in World War I, as happened in World War II, and each zone will be given to a power. Maybe China will get a zone too. And what the world wants is economic stability. There's an economic crisis. The economic crisis is not good for China either. And so I think there's a commonality of interests here in which we will see, I think we will see a controlled conflict, a controlled war, a very short war against Iran, in which the Ayatollah leadership will probably be granted asylum in Russia. And it'll be over in 3 days, because if the Russians and the Chinese and the Americans and the United Nations all march against Iran, it's like a house of cards. It's going to come down. And same with Syria. The problem with Syria and Lebanon is when it's taken over by the Arab Spring, when it's taken over by the Sunnis, that's complete insanity. And so we're going to see an Armageddon. The point I'm saying is that the war between the Sunnis and the Shiites is so overpowering that 1,400 years, I mean, the Catholics and Protestants were killing each other for 300 years and basically got over it. But the Sunnis and Shiites have never gotten over it. They never will. And the war in Syria, and by extension Lebanon, is one in which I believe the Turks, Hezbollah are 40,000, big deal. The Turkish army is 600,000. That's the Sunnis. And the Egyptians, they're ready to go fight also against the Shiites. And the Saudis, and all these. By the way, I have to tell you something that's lurking in the background. Today, almost half of the conscripts in the Russian army are Muslim.
That's right, and that's a big deal.
Yep. What kind of Muslim? Sunnis. And so the 200 million Muslims in the 6 former Soviet republics, they're Sunnis. And the Shiites are all concentrated right there in the Persian Gulf. But, I think this religious hatred between the Sunnis and Shiites is so great that there is no way that Bashar al-Assad can remain in power. The Sunnis will win, and the State Department's behind them. So very, very unfortunately, this will lead to even a worse enemy against Israel, which will be the Armageddon Sunnis.
Right. In fact, I agree. I think the Armageddon Sunnis are what's coming down the road. It says the desert of the burden of the sea, which is the Red Sea, will be vaporized, and so will the city of Damascus. And down the road, it'll be where they try to attack Israel, and Israel will annihilate them.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think of Israel as the 51st state. Most people think of Israel as a separate country. I think of America as Ephraim and Israel as like the two sticks of the two houses of Israel. And people don't understand that. They don't realize just how close our allies are and how even our economy is tied to the situation. Do they?
Absolutely. And by the way, you know, Jesus is not a Muslim. He's a Jew.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He was a Jew all the way.
Yeah.
And absolutely. Thank you, Avi. We'll have you back on soon. Remarkable perspective. Yeah, I think the outbreak of peace is coming quickly, and the time of Jacob's trouble and the abomination that desolates very soon.
I know all of you go home, put on the news, and you hear about Israel. I haven't spoken yet about Gaza. Very interesting question. Is Israel going to invade Gaza? It always does. And then the United States and the Europeans make us pull out without a conclusive victory. ISIS, how many people heard of ISIS? ISIS is this fanatic army of crazy Muslims who are they're killing their own people before they kill anyone else, chopping heads off. You know, we have these soccer games in Brazil. Argentina defeated Holland today. Yay! My family's from Argentina. I really hope they defeat the Germans too, but that's okay. Do you know what they do, the ISIS people? They chop the heads off of their fellow Sunni Muslims and then they kick the heads around. That's their soccer tournament. They're kicking heads around of their own fellow Muslims that they just beheaded who weren't Muslim enough. Can you tell me any word other than Satan to describe this? Okay. ISIS is paid for by the Saudis. How many people have heard of you sow a wind and you reap a whirlwind? That's what the Saudis have done. The king of Saudi Arabia is an infidel, a heretic, and traitor who will have his head chopped off by these ISIS people. They're coming home to roost. You have horrible unemployment in Saudi Arabia. All the wealth is hoarded by the 6,000 princes and their families. But the worst crime of the king of Saudi Arabia is he sells America the oil. He sells the Christians the oil. And then the money he reinvests in the United States to take over your industries and your banks and your media and build you homes and for the Muslims. But these Muslims, the ISIS Muslims, are working at cross purposes with the king of Saudi Arabia. So he's an infidel. They're going to kill him. How do you destroy Christianity? You destroy the economy. How do you destroy the economy of America? You deny America the oil. How do you deny America the oil? You blow up the oil wells. ISIS is going to blow up the oil wells. And then the one world government, the harlot, is going to say, no way, Jose. And Saudi Arabia, I believe, will be occupied. It'll be occupied by United Nations forces, and Israel is going to take northwest Saudi Arabia at the orders of the one world government. When Israel takes Mecca and Medina, the Muslim world is going to rise up against Israel. And the black stone will have to be evaporated. It'll be evaporated by laser. Nobody's going to get killed. But the Muslims will wake up one morning and they're going to hear that the God of Israel is greater than their God. I don't hate the Muslims, like I don't hate the Germans. The Germans could only get a life in 1945 when Nazism was banned. The Muslims will only have a life when Islam is banned. And it will be banned, because if they're going to destroy the oil wells, the one world government is going to ban Islam, not the Christians, not the Jews. You know, I know many, many people say to me, when are you Jews going to build the third temple? And the answer is, we're never going to build the third temple. Because to build the temple, we have to destroy the mosques. To destroy the mosques, it's going to start World War III, so we're not going to do it. And if there's an earthquake tomorrow and destroys the mosques, we Jews will rebuild the mosques to show them that we want peace. You know, the Muslims will say, instead of thank you, let's make peace, they'll say, aha, Allah has confused them, like he did to Moshe Dayan. Do you understand the different way of thinking of the Muslims? You do them good and they despise you because they say Allah has confuse you, and then we're going to kill the Jew and the Christian. It's a sickness. It's crazy. And so, the temple can be built is when the black stone in Mecca is gone. When Islam is defeated, then the one world government will come to the Jews and say, now build your temple, because no one will oppose it. We have already defeated the God of Islam. And then the Antichrist will say, oh, good, we got the temple up, now I can come declare myself as God. So my interpretation of the Antichrist is not somebody coming out of Islam. It'll be somebody who suppresses Islam and destroys it. But the point I'm saying is, for this stage, my focus is on Islam. Because Islam is a horrible system, killing its own people and killing us and destroying the world. And so the good news, you all know who wins. You know the back of the book. And you know that God laughs. God is like Santa Claus up there. Ho, ho, ho. How many people heard the foolishness of the Lord is greater than the wisdom of man? I say amen to that. God's in control. I don't want anyone here to leave tonight depressed or alarmed or whatever, because God's going to do miracle things. But God wants us to be on His side. And that's the job of all of us here, to bring all Americans, all human beings over to the side of God. And I hope I am doing my part together with you.